Pleasure. So you've been listening to a couple of people actually talking about drone stuff for the last 20 minutes. Right now we have opportunities to speak more. We are here actually to talk about drones being used in the cities, especially in fire. I would say even police rescue. We are seeing what's happening in U.S. right now. Last year I remember when one of the hurricanes hit Florida. For instance, all the energy companies in the U.S. send their drone teams down to Florida actually to assist, with the assessment, planning, and all of that. So, what's your thought? Do you think that actually gonna see the drones helping to fight, I would say crime, but at least fires or rescuing people in the cities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you're trialing or you've got a proof of concept, to manage one drone and one pilot is very easy. What we're now seeing is organizations who have success in that program, but they now want to scale it up. And the complexity of that increases. And when you increase the complexity in your organization, and then you bring many organizations together, you begin to see what's happening in America today with the hurricane, where they have to manage lots of different agencies using lots of different aircraft, integrating with lots of different air users, and the significant challenges that brings.
Yeah, definitely. But do you think that actually organizations are ready, or they're getting there in terms of actually preparing them, not the equipment, because actually buying drones is the simplest thing you can do, right? But actually training people, getting all the procedures in place, this must be a challenge.
I think they massively underestimate what it takes. Again, one drone, one pilot, very simple. But they are using drones, their core business, their specialism is to be a fire officer, is to be a police officer. They are not experts in scaling up technology programs, training programs, and quite often they don't know what they don't know. That's a risk with any new technology. If you take an analogy, maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago, when organizations moved from paper to computers, they had to bring in lots of different machines, they had to manage their data, they had to train their people on it. It was a huge program. And lots of specialist organizations developed that we know of today, the big names, that would do that as a service for organizations. I think trying to do it yourself is a huge risk. And I think we're beginning to see organizations where they've made mistakes. They're not sure where their data is. They're not sure if people are competent. How are they managing competencies inside their organization? How are they discharging their responsibility to be a responsible user?
Definitely agree with you. Actually, I've seen a lot of examples when an organization tried to move into this space and they're just buy a drone and just go crazy. Actually, have seen the drones in China, which were not firefighting, but actually they were with flamethrowers. Actually helping to remove the debris from the power lines, which is just insane. Yeah. But this is exactly kind of a game that they are getting into. So tell me, in terms of larger scale deployment, are there any government programs you see in European Union actually going this way, or this is something only because if you're talking about municipalities or actually fire departments, they usually rely on the government funding. So are there any government programs except for the use space, but this is other discussion going there?
So I think there's a number of projects, and I think we're just at that stage in the industry where they're just beginning to be initiated. So in the UK, we have a project called the Flying High project, and it was a city-led approach. So we didn't take the technology and try to force it upon people. The organisation went to the cities and said, what would you like to see in your city? How do we get that public confidence? And because there's a number of different cities involved, they've got different use cases. So if you're by the coast, there's advantages for maritime surveillance. If you're in a city, maybe you can help tackle congestion. So that's one project we're aware of. There's others in the United States where, again, they've picked states and cities to lead with some of the delivery you might have seen in the press. And over in other countries, I think what we're seeing is countries that don't have legacy technology, so they can go straight to the advanced solutions.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, because actually there are a lot of projects in this regard funded by United Nations Development Program in Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, happening right now, and actually because they don't have nothing, it's way easier actually for them to deploy those systems. So they are moving heavily into the space. They are heavily funded. Whereas actually, if you want to deploy any this sort of solution, let's say here in Katowice or Warsaw or Manchester, actually you have to deal with everyone. And flying the drones is fun, but especially in the city, you have to deal with all the regulatory bodies. And sometimes in some countries it's simple as you have one body. In Poland it's quite simple. We have a Polish Air Navigation Agency. Whereas in very often in US, for instance in US you have FAA, but also you have federal and state regulations, who can actually impose additional levies on that. So this,
I think a great example is with Zipline in Rwanda. They're delivering medical supplies, and again, like you said, they don't have complicated airspace, they don't have congested towns and cities, so they can pretty much operate in isolation, and they don't need any of the supporting infrastructure. Now, if we were to take that exact same service and launch it as a project in London, which is actually being done, the complexity increases by a huge magnitude. And all those agencies you mentioned, the ones I can think of the top of my head are the Aviation Authority, the Air Traffic Service Provider, the local security, the municipal government, the authority that runs the river, the Port of London Authority. There's lots of stakeholders that will all want to have their say on whether you should or should not be allowed to fly over at that particular point. And it's maybe the driver is easier when it's critical, so medical supplies, public security. But then as we go to pizza delivery, coffee, how important is that? Will people pay attention to help drive that project forward?
Yeah, but still, I agree fully that in the city it's terribly difficult because, you're going to have different areas. You're going to have a lot of government agencies you cannot fly above. You're going to have a lot of government agencies you don't even know you cannot fly above, right? Especially for London, Warsaw, all the capital cities have, agencies that with some, I would say, departments we are not totally public. So you're going to have a lot of blockers actually moving into this area, which is terrible because if we are talking about the fire, police, whatnot, everyone's seen, the cops actually following, the guys chase on the highways. So this is what we want to see, and actually deployment of such technologies, and this would be terribly difficult. I would say visual line of sight is enabled in UK right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually it's usable actually for a city to have a.
Yes, I would say with a visual line of sight operation, so I touched on it earlier, the use cases today, the opportunities, is when not only can the drone see data that your eye can interpret, but also you can still see the drone in your line of sight. We've had quite a permissive regulator who really helped enable the operations. So there's over 4,000 commercial operators in the UK right now. And what we've seen now is maybe 50% of regional police forces have all adopted drone technology, and a significant portion of them now have dedicated drone police people in their teams. Their job is to respond with a drone to a particular event, and they've used it for crowd control. They used it to look for missing people, and with lots of success. It makes it into the press. The Norfolk Police Department found a guy that got stuck in some mud flats. Devon Police Department found somebody that was a known suicide spot. And with some of the rural police forces, they have to cover a lot of area. And typically, the story that we were told was the police officer would turn up and it would take him 30 minutes to walk to the top of a hill and check and then come back down again. He can now take the drone out of his car, fly up, check, and then immediately return to his car and better utilize his time, but at the same time not expose themselves to the same costs you might see with a manned helicopter.
Yeah, I've seen actually amazing examples of drones being used for crowd control and actually planning during the Hajj in Saudi, because this is one of the largest gathering of people that's happening every year, and every year people die because just simply being trotted over. So this is terrible. So actually they're trying to deploy drones doing exactly this. However, what's very important for them in Saudi is privacy. Privacy of, that you're flying over some people's houses. For instance, in Poland, if you fly over someone's house, as long as you're, just above the ground, this is public space. So this is governed by this. As far as you know, in UK, some part of the airspace above your house, this is yours. Or
there's a particular case law in the UK. It's called Skyviews versus Bernstein, 1977. And they was proven in court that you only own enough airspace over your property that you're prepared to use. So if I want to build a skyscraper, I can just keep adding floor after floor after floor. If I live in a bungalow, then the airspace above my property is not mine.
Okay.
And there's very similar case law around in the United States, for instance, obviously just based on different precedents.
Yeah, but this is because people actually start asking questions. You're gonna have drones flying over your head. Even for police, let's say how are you gonna control the data? Yeah, who's looking at in my backyard?
Yeah.
For instance, in Saudi, the moment the Google Maps deployed actually Google Maps like 15 years ago, the sale of any umbrellas, garden umbrellas, increased tenfold, because they don't want anyone looking at their backyard. So if you try to zoom in on the houses in Saudi, you're gonna see nothing.
And I think that's a really interesting point, because bringing the technology, seeing the advantage the technology has, is just one aspect. If the public are concerned about privacy, if they're concerned about safety, they won't care about the advantages. They'll just not want it to happen. And you can compare that to other evolutions in technology, or particularly food is an example that the UK government often compare it to, which is genetically modified crops.
Yeah.
There was quite a lot of advantages of why you might use it, but because of the way it was interpreted by the press and the public and the terms they attached to it, people do not want to embrace genetically modified food. And if we had done, it would solve some of the problems that we might have in yield. So going back to the drone technology, if I'm concerned that I'm being spied on by the police force, it will lose the advantages that the police are using to actually find missing people or to help crowd control. And I think it's worth noting as well, that at the moment, the police are not using it to chase criminals down the street. I think we're quite far away from tactical responses. It's very much a planning tool, so they can put it over a sports event, and they can begin to plan what's going on, or like the event you mentioned.
Yeah, I've seen some search and rescue actually applications as well, right? Because search and rescue is the other thing.
Yeah.
For instance, there's a company in Poland. They develop a very strong drone, being that you can actually deploy as a rescue on the seaside. That you can actually send a drone up, not to drop any a floating device, but actually drop a line, and the drone is able to pull you back to the shore, even if you're 2 kilometers away. And it's amazing. It's actually this is actually practical use of rescue, and we don't have to deal with privacy and all of that. So definitely the drones are a very cool tool and a very versatile tool actually to apply, right?
And I think I think it was in Australia as well, and I think it's only prototype, but they had the rubber ring. They would fly out and drop the life-saving device to the drowning swimmer, which could get there much quicker than the lifeguard. It can get there first, help support the person that's drowning. They've got something to hold on to. Meanwhile, the lifeguard's swimming out trying to get to him, but it will still take 2 or 3 more minutes. But 2 or 3 minutes when you're drowning,
yeah,
quite important.
However, I've seen actually the practical tests of dropping the floating device on the sea doesn't work.
Okay.
Because the waves, everything, distortion. If you drop something from 10 meters, the wind's gonna blow it off. If you're drowning and it's 10 meters off, it's too far.
Yeah, and I think that's where one of the previous guests said it's about your imagination now. So we can try things, we can see things, and maybe we've not even thought about it before. And then hopefully projects, universities, research departments can begin to work out how we get better at that. There's a great project in Australia that they run every year, and the objective is to find a missing person in the outback. And once you've identified that person, they have to fly over and drop a bottle of water. And I think 2 years ago was the first time they managed to drop the bottle of water to within a 10-meter gap of that person, because of the advances in the processing power, the algorithms. They worked out the wind direction, which way it was going to fall. So at the moment, that life-saving device might miss the drowning person, but people will pay attention now because it will stoke their imagination.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, I met some guys in Spain who developed a very simple sensor to attach to the drone for looking for a missing person in the mountains. Actually, Spain they have a lot of mountains. They approximately 150 people get lost in the mountain every year, and they don't find them again. Okay. So actually, they send a drone with a receiver, a GPS, cellular network receiver. So actually, by the number of the phone, they actually find people, and they're able to triangulate the location of people in the mountains, but there are no cell reception. So this is kind of amazing, tool actually to find someone who's missing. And in Australia, actually, I heard about they using drones actually to survey the shores to see if there are any sharks happening. So prior, sharks attacks, apparently this is something happening down under. So,
and I think we've just seen technology now come into the market. There's an amazing manufacturer in America called Skydio, and they're using machine vision. And they're now opening up their platform so that other people can build upon it and utilize the technology they've got. And I think when you start seeing things like that happen, that's when all the innovation will start happening, and we'll start seeing the next wave. But it's got to move together. You know, we can have the technology. We'll need to counter the privacy, the security. We'll need to make sure people are trained. They understand how to use it. They understand how to deploy it.
I agree with you fully that actually the key is to have a proper use cases. Proper use case. So that's why I love, you know, the case you mentioned in UK, that you have different cities actually doing different stuff. They want to do it differently. And this is just the right way to do, because if you're gonna have a bunch of engineers doing stuff, they're gonna go crazy, right? We're gonna have Tesla.
Very much.
All right, I think our time's up.
Amazing.
Thanks, man.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the chat. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.